Now for a video that I think some of you have been waiting for. An update on the tomatoes. Welcome back to Ecocentric Homestead, and I'll bring you in close now. This is the Stupicet. Stupicet tomato is a potato leaf tomato. Leaves are shaped more like the potato plant than the tomatoes. But you can see, here's my hand, it's growing. They're growing nicely. They are in on the northwest corner of the house. And you can see they're setting fruit. They're coming along. I think I might have a couple that's starting to ripen, I'm not sure. I have two plants, and both of them are setting fruit fairly well in the pots here. And when the cold weather comes, if I have any that's not ripened, they'll be going in the sunroom. Coming here, this is a much bigger plant and stockier. He's in the ground by the frame at the south side of the house. I don't think they get extra large. They are a little bigger than the ordinary cherry tomato, I think, but I don't think they get really large. It's nice dark green foliage, stocky plant. It puts out a nice amount of flowers, not an extreme abundance. And they're getting pollinated well, being here outdoors. That's the end for Stupicet. I'm happy with, this is the silver fir tree tomato with its delicate foliage. And it's growing really nice here in this container. I need to kind of tie it up somehow so that it's not hanging all over when it comes time to bring them in. The tomatoes come out kind of interestingly shaped. Here's another one. This plant, it's a beautiful plant. Beautiful specimen, and it's not putting out a lot of flowers yet. I don't know if it will. I'll show you the next one now. Growing in the soil, it's not growing as large. What it has done is given us example of it's going to have fairly large tomatoes. This one, you see by the color, it's a long ways from being fully grown yet. So that's going to be a good slicing tomato to put on a sandwich. We've got another one here coming along. Now this is a different kind of tomato, and it's got tomatoes coming. If I'm lucky, this will be a Beaver Lodge slicer. Unfortunately, that means I can't, well, if I take the seed from this one, being so close to other tomatoes, it's got a higher possibility of being crossed, so I won't know if what I got there is pure silver fir tree or not, so no good for me to bother trying. I'm happy with them though, they're growing great. Beaver Lodge slicer, I think I mentioned this one on a tour too. It's growing nice and stocky. It really wouldn't even need a support there. But it is in the bucket that I already had the support on. And the few tomatoes that was growing there in the last time I mentioned these, They're coming along with quite a few more now. Here's the Beaver Lodge slicer that I've got planted in the cold frame. It is still quite stocky. Look at this clump of tomatoes growing here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tomatoes. They're in the one clump. And we have another clump up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have another clump starting here, one up here. It's going to produce a lot of slicing tomatoes by the looks of it. And this is July the 30th. Plenty of time for them to ripen. Now, Latta was one of the ones that I had the best germination on, and the plants grew the best initially. Sitting here in this bucket, it is not overly strong. It would definitely need support. Here we've got some of the tomatoes that are growing on it. Over here, it is once again putting out a good number of flowers, not extremely abundant, but a good number. Here it is in the ground on the south side of the house, getting full sunlight. But the other one that I just showed you is just right there in that bucket. So we come down, see the tomatoes are coming along nicely. They're not finished growing yet. And it's hanging down because, like I said, it should have support really. It's not going to grow extremely stocky because of the extra light like some of the other tomatoes are doing. But because I had good germination with this and the initial seedlings grew very well, I have several of these scattered throughout the garden. With the biggest excitement being right here. So you remember my carrots and one of the seed plants for parsnips. We come along right down beside it. This is a Lattice Tomato. It didn't grow much bigger than the other ones, but it's almost right. Technically, I could take it as is and try it now, because I like Tiny Tim when they're at about this stage. And there are a few others. It's not growing as big here, but like I said, it is just out in the middle of the field. It's putting on a few flowers, and it's got a ripe tomato already. And then we walk along to the back side of this bed with the beans and the volunteer mustard in. And we have this one. Now remember, this is the north side. So this gets a lot of shade from these mustard plants. And yet it is still growing here. And has 2 tomatoes growing on it. And it has a few flowers. So I will get a harvest from this, even though it's on the north side out into the open field and being shaded by taller plants to the south of it. Furthest north, it was a little bit slower getting going. And it was one of the ones that I was waiting to have an obvious fruit on before I done the tomato update. But it has taken off now, and even in this bucket you see the number of flowers that it has on it. Put out a lot of flowers. Of course, that's one of its fruit there. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4. I can see 4 or 5 fruit in the frame there. 6, 7. So it's putting on quite a few fruit, and it is putting on a lot of flowers. Furthest north, it's got a little bit of shade behind me here from the lilac bush. It's growing, as you can see, the stalks are a little thinner, so it might need some extra support. Look at the amount of flowers that this thing is putting on. And in here, with the meadow there and all, there is so many fruit already growing on it. This is going to produce a lot of tomatoes. Furthest north is definitely a keeper. I had 2 more furthest north plants, which I put up here. You see there's the soldier beans, and they're in full sunlight until late in the afternoon. They're getting close to the forest right there. And once again, look at the amount of flowers that they're putting on. Some fruit starting down here, and if I were to look in where some of these flowers are fading, almost all of them, of the fading flowers, would have a fruit started. This is a cherry tomato, so I will have an abundance of cherry tomatoes from furthest north. Centennial Rocket, if you remember, was the one that I first noticed fruit set on. You can see that this one now is starting to change color. And I think this is about the size of tomatoes that they give. It's just like a large cherry tomato. This plant, for some reason, has not grown very well, even though, like I said, it was the first one to put on the fruit set. It didn't continue to grow up. It's put on several flowers here, and see, you got more fruit set over there. So I'm going to get a few tomatoes off it. If it doesn't grow, it might be another good one to try inside. If this is all it does, that height, it'll be similar to a Tiny Tim, and can be growing in the grow-on. But when I planted it in the soil, you get this. It's still quite a bush, and it's spread out quite far. It has put on a lot of flowers, and look at the fruit set. There's a lot of fruit growing on that already. And we have all of August. It doesn't get hot enough here to make them wilt. Well, we have all of August, and maybe in September we'll see what happens. I had yellow pear tomatoes produce in September, so who knows? They may be producing up until end of September. nobody need much introduction to Tiny Tim. As we were saying, outside he grows tiny alright. And he's getting fruit set. You'll see how big his fruit grows out here in the full sun. But he's a cute little plant there, and I have several of them planted around the garden. Here we have two more. They're by the garlic. A little tiny thing of a plant. You see the tomatoes it's got growing on it? A whole bunch of tomatoes there. And this one, growing tomatoes. Little tiny plant growing a big bunch of tomatoes. Here's the one I put over with the herbs. Oh, let's see if I can get this camera around in another angle. Here we are, on the side facing the sun, is where most of the fruit is setting. You see, quite a nice little bunch. So Tiny Tim can be growing outside, easy enough, and of course at this size, you could have it close to put over it any time of the year, if it doesn't get any bigger than that. Last, but I found out not the least really, I wasn't happy with this plant, and still, it's small. This is the 42 days. It does have some fruit set on it. It had very poor germination, and this plant is not growing very much. But I did give one of these plants to my neighbor, and I recorded some footage earlier today. This is the 42 days tomato that I gave my neighbor. It's just loaded in fruit. And it's got many flowers. He's put it in his greenhouse. Just wanted to point out those two there. Fairly large tomatoes. They're about halfway between a cherry and a slicer, I guess. If you've been watching Shed Wars, you'll know that I did put a 42 days tomato in the beginner gardening bed. Full sunlight pretty much all day. It has put on several fruit. 3 there, there's 3 over there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So there's quite a few fruit put on this one, even though the plant has not grown that big, and it has quite a few more flowers ready to be pollinated. So I'm thinking it will produce fairly well for the size of the plant there. This, however, is the 42 days that I have growing in the sunroom. It has already set fruit, so it was fairly easy to set fruit on. I've got it tied up to the post in several places, and I just did the shake the flower thing like this to help it set fruit, right? Because that was one of the complaints I was having about growing tomatoes in this sunroom, was that I was having trouble getting them to fruit. But it seems like the 42 days did respond, see there's more fruit set there, to me just coming and tapping the flowers like that. And it's going to be very soon up to the top of that frame. It's not a loss. All tomatoes really in Newfoundland would benefit from being grown in a greenhouse. But I think 42 days, especially if you grow it in a greenhouse, you will have good success. It's not an outside plant for Newfoundland, I don't think. It darkened down again. I could take off my sunglasses and actually look at you. That is our tomato update. I am happy with it so far. I researched the tomatoes, how many days they were to maturity, how much heat they would need, and selected them likewise. I'm going to save seeds from the ones that I have spaced out, so that I will have these varieties now, and I think I have another 8 to try for next year. You'll have to wait and see on that. For now, I hope you enjoyed the video. The thumbs up if you did. Make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you in the next video.